Hi guys, so today we are going to learn some watercolor techniques. We're going to learn wet and wet, wet on dry, wet on a dry layer of paint, dry brush, masking tape resist, crayon resist, lift with paper towel, salt, and then we're also going to learn how to create black without using black. So before we get started on painting, we are going to measure out a grid. We're going to start with a piece of paper that is 9 by 12, and we're going to start by applying our tick marks. The top, if you noticed, is just an inch where you put your watercolor technique label, your name and section. So I'm going to start by measuring that first. So I'm going to flip my paper sideways, and that's just about an inch. The blocks are 2 inches in height. So I'm just going to put a mark at 2, 4, 6, and then there's a mark at 8. Do that again for the other side. 2, 4, 6, 8. There we go. The width of each block is 3 inches. So we are going to start with 3, 6, 9, and then 12 is the edge of the paper. Move up. Only go where those first tick marks are. 3, 6, 9. Now we're going to put our lines. Now that we're finished drawing out our blocks, you should have 16 2-inch by 3-inch blocks. You're going to put your name at the top and your section. You're also going to put Watercolor Techniques so we know what this is. The first technique is wet and wet wash. Now that we have all the techniques written in, we can get started. I just want to explain what the numbers mean. The number 1 is your first attempt. You only have to paint each technique one time. If you're unhappy with how the technique turned out, you can do it on the block where it says 2. The only techniques that we are only painting once is the masking tape resist and the crayon resist. So the first one is wet on wet. You should have your watercolor palette. It should be clean on the left side. And I would start out with natural bristled brushes. They're the brown bristles. Wet and wet wash is exactly as it sounds. It's wet paint on wet paper. So you're going to start by dipping your paintbrush in water, tapping the sides so you don't have too much water, and just painting sideways, just some water. Your paint is only going to go where your wash has been applied, your water wash. So now I'm going to pick a color, any color that you want. I'm going to start with violet. I'm not going to take the violet and directly put it into the block because I don't know how potent the paint is going to apply. So I want to apply it first up here. It looks quite dark. So I'm going to take a little bit of the pigment off, tap the side, and now I have a light violet. Paint that in. Go in one direction. You don't want to go back and forth because it's just going to tear the paper. And that's it, wet and wet. Wet on dry is basically what it sounds like, wet paint on dry paper. I'm going to take a new color, maybe some orange. Again, put the orange up top. I'm pretty happy with that color. And you can make a shape or you can just paint a few lines. This should be slightly more potent than the wet and wash. Wet on dry layer, we're actually going to start by painting a shape. And I just want to show you what that looks like eventually. It will eventually look like a shape with a shadow, but we're going to start out with just the first base color and let it dry today. Take a color. Maybe I went like a blue-green, so if you're mixing colors, you want to clean your brush. Dip it into the blue. Put some blue up there. Clean your brush. I want a little more green in that color. There's my blue-green. Paint a shape. So I'm going to paint a cube. We see more than the front of the cube, so I'm also going to paint the sides. We're going to allow that to dry and we're going to add a shadow once it's dry. Dry brush is fairly easy. You take a wet brush, dry it on your paper towel, dip it in the color, dry it off. You can spread out the bristles to get the tips of the bristles to hit the paper, and then simply just put that on your paper. This is good for grass, texture on a tree. You don't want to press hard with the brush because you get something like that. You want to show the texture of the tips of the bristles. Something like that. Masking tape resist is exactly as it sounds. So for the resist, we want to use tape that isn't really sticky. And masking tape is really good for areas that we need perfectly straight edges that you don't want to freehand. So you just want to put the masking tape in a shape using the straight edges in the center of your shape. I'm just going to make a triangle. You can make any shape that you like. Take some brown, test the brown. It's going to be very potent, as you can see the color in the palette. And just carefully paint that in. Let that dry before you remove the tape. I'm going to use brown again for a lift with paper towel, and all you're doing for the lift with paper towel is painting on the area, wet paint, dry paper, crinkling a piece of a paper towel up, and just kind of blotting it to get some texture. And every time you paint in and lift, you should get a little bit of texture. It'll work better on the watercolor paper because it's not going to sink through the paper. When we use salt, the chemical reaction isn't going to show right away, but I just want to show you an example of what salt looks like after it dries. It pushes away the pigment in the areas that the salt falls. Your paint has to be wet and wet enough for the salt to melt into your paper. So I'm going to take another color. I'm going to use blue this time. Test my blue out. And you want quite a bit of water for this one. Must be wet. Take your salt, just take a pinch of salt and put that all on your paint. And in about 20 minutes or so, once it dries, you should see the effect. Next, we're going to do crown resist. Crown resist is basically like when you have those Easter eggs and there's that magic crown, you dip the Easter egg in the dye and it resists the area that you colored on. Same effect. We're going to use white. And this is good for areas that you want to remain white on your painting. You won't be able to see the white crown. So I'm just going to draw a scribble. You can also draw a shape. Then you're going to paint over the whole area with any color that you want. I'm going to take some red. Looks like it's been mixed with another color. It looks like a red-brown now. And just paint over the area. You're going to get a little bit of bubbling. If you don't want that bubbling to dry, take a little bit of a paper towel and just block the area to remove the bubbling. And you should get something like that. Lastly, we're going to create black without black. And you want to do that using two colors. You can either use brown and violet, brown and blue, or brown, violet, and blue. You want to mix it at the top of your palette until it looks like the perfect shade of gray or deep black. So I already have blue and violet up here. And there's a lot of water here, so it's going to appear gray. I'm going to grab some brown and mix that in there. If it looks too brown, you're going to have to mix the opposite color, some blue or some violet. Maybe a little more blue. This is going to turn out gray because there's a lot of water. And then you're just going to paint that in the black without black area. If you want it to be a deeper gray, you have to use more pigment and less water so it doesn't appear so light. Now that our wet on dry layer appears pretty dry, we're going to mix the opposite color of blue-green, and the opposite of blue-green is a red-orange. And the reason I know that is because on the color wheel, directly across from blue-green is red-orange. So I'm going to take a red-orange, and I'm not going to put it directly on my shape, but I'm going to end up mixing blue and green in with my red-orange now that that's dry. So I'm going to take some red. So now I have a red-orange right here. Cleaning my brush every time that I mix it into a new color. I'm going to get some water. Now I'm going to grab some green, throw that into my red-orange, clean my brush, grab a little bit of blue. It looks a little too blue, so I'm going to pull some more orange. You want to get a shadow color, and that looks like a pretty good shadow color. I'm going to put that on the side of my cube where the shadow would appear. And also, if you like, you can paint a shadow on the surface where it would appear. Something like that. If your paint pools in a certain area of your paper, just take a paper towel and gently soak up any excess color. Once your masking tape resist dries, you can lift that up . And you should have a nice shape, and it shouldn't rip the paper if your masking tape isn't sticky. And those are all the techniques. If you're not happy with the first attempt, which does happen a lot, you can do a second attempt directly below it.